Good morning, Bucknutters. It is Wednesday, July 1st, 2015. I am Dan Rubin. This is the Bucknuts Morning 5 and Change. Today we are joined by the one and only Dean of Midwest Recruiting, Bill Kurelic himself. Bill, how are you this fine morning?
Doing very well, Dan. Doing very well, and I hope all the Bucknuts listeners are as well.
First day of July, as I look outside, still gray in the Gem City. The weather's completely unacceptable. Another story for another time. We're going to ask Bill maybe a softball to get started here, but then the goal of this podcast will be to make the Dean sweat. As everybody knows, when it comes to making predictions or offering up opinions, the Dean can be a tad conservative, so we're going to try and push him a little bit here. But first, in his wheelhouse, Bill, as recruiting goes this weekend or the next few days, anything we should be keeping our eyes on, or is this kind of a lull here?
Well, it's a lull in that, the coaches are on vacation, and the NCAA has a dead period now. It actually just started a year ago. It's a 2-week dead period. Started at 12:01 a.m. on Monday morning, goes for 2 weeks, and, the coaches cannot have face-to-face contact with prospects, so they can't host prospects for the rest of this week and next week. So that slows things down a little bit, but you're only going to slow the Ohio State staff down so much. I mean, there's still going to be recruiting going on. The prospects can call coaches, for instance. They just can't have face-to-face contact. So I don't expect anything to happen as far as, there's not going to be somebody show up and make a visit to Ohio State, but you never know. That doesn't mean somebody could not commit. I don't necessarily expect it to happen, but the Ohio State staff, they're going to be back in full gear, so to speak, after the dead period, and then that leads into not that long until Friday Night Lights, and, of course, that's going to be huge.
All right, here we go. Here come the tough ones. The most popular topic in the United States, now that those dudes were caught in the prison escape, who will start at quarterback for Ohio State? I want to ask you a different question. You saw all three of these guys play in high school. Of the three, Braxton Miller, Cardale Jones, and J.T. Barrett, who's the best high school quarterback in your opinion?
I would probably, when you're just saying all-around quarterback, I would probably have to go with Braxton Miller. He wasn't a great thrower then, but he had a very strong arm and he got the job done. But spectacular athlete, just a tremendous ability to make tacklers miss. Electrifying. He's a guy that just gives opposing, or had, especially in high school, opposing defensive coordinators and opposing head coaches nightmares. I mean, how are you going to stop this guy? And he's been much the same at Ohio State, 2-time Big Ten MVP, and tremendous ability to make things happen. I'd have to go with Braxton, but you're talking about three great high school quarterbacks there, so that's not an easy one to pick out. But you're asking me to pick out one, Dan, so I'm going to go with Braxton.
Speaking of another electric athlete at quarterback, high school that is, Torrance Gibson, member of the current recruiting class. When all is said and done, will Torrance Gibson take more snaps in his Ohio State career as a quarterback or a wide receiver?
That's another tough one, because I fully expect him, to get a great shot at being Ohio State's quarterback. It's not going to be, a couple days of quarterback and then we're moving you to wide receiver or whatever. That's not what they told him coming in. That's not what's going to happen. They're going to give him a great shot, and he's, like you said, Dan, he's an electrifying athlete. And with the Irvin's offense, he could be a special type guy. But having said that, I'm going to say a switch to wide receiver at some point and more snaps there, because I really, as much as I like Torrance Gibson, I really, really, really like Joe Burrow. And I think Joe Burrow has a chance to be an outstanding quarterback for Ohio State. I was talking to some coaches at one of the one-day camps who recruited Joe at some point during his high school career, and feeling was is this guy improved so much that he's going to play quarterback for Ohio State someday, and I think there's a great chance of that happening. So because of that, I can see Torrance Gibson eventually being the guy at wide receiver for Ohio State. So I'm going to go with more snaps at a position other than quarterback, that position being wide receiver.
Very interesting. I think I would agree. There's some highlights of Torrance Gibson playing some receiver at the opening last year, and he's running away from elite defensive backs like they're in quicksand. So be very interesting to watch. All right. Nick Vannett was just ranked by Ohio State starting tight end. Nick Vannett was just ranked by Mel Kiper as the top available tight end for the draft next year. Compare these two as high school prospects, Westerville's Nick Vannett or Perry's Luke Farrell.
That's interesting in that obviously I live here in Central Ohio, and I was pretty familiar with seeing Nick Vannett. In fact, the last high school basketball game of my son's junior year, he was playing against Nick Vannett on the court at that time when Nick Vannett was a high school basketball player for Westerville Central, and a pretty darn good one. So I've seen Nick Vannett play football. I've seen him play basketball. Very talented athlete. A guy, as you mentioned, Dan, that's going to have an NFL future. But as much as I like Nick Vannett, Luke Farrell, I think, is a special athlete. I think he's underrated, to be honest. He's still a top 10 prospect in the state of Ohio. And you say, how can you be underrated being a top 10 prospect in the state of Ohio, one of the country's top tight ends? Well, I just think he's even better than a lot of people give him credit for. Again, talking to somebody I really respect their knowledge at one of Ohio State's one-day camps, and they feel like he might be as good as any prospect in the state of Ohio, period, out of this year, 2016 prospect. Special athlete. I saw him at camp for one of the first times last term, and he was outstanding. Great hands, runs well enough. He's definitely an NFL caliber, big time tight end if he stays healthy and continues to develop like I think he will.
Okay, Bill, we're going to finish with this one. This has been great. When we talked about the class that's in here now, for example, you and I, we always come back to Jerome Baker as a kind of a guy that both of us think is just excellent. And in every class, he develops some favorites. This is a purely positive thing. We know about the class of 2016 because we talked about it so much, not including guys they have commitments from. Rank your top three right now. Bill Kurelic's top three for the class of 2017.
Now we're talking prospects that Ohio State would like to add to the class of 2017. Is that correct?
Correct. So I can speak out of turn here. Number one would probably be Trevon Grimes. But after that, who are the other two guys, or even not, you can trump Grimes, in the class they don't have a commitment from yet, you think that are the best players or the ones they want the most, kind of a combination of the two?
Okay. Well, yeah, I'd put Trevon Grimes certainly up for tremendous talent. And we've talked about this before, Dan. I really think there's a good chance he's going to commit to Ohio State come the weekend of Friday Night Lights. He'll be at Friday Night Lights, and I like the odds, Buckeyes odds of landing him. So I'll put him up there at the top. I love Isaiah Pryor, the outstanding safety. And, again, Buckeye fans, they have a very legitimate shot at landing Isaiah Pryor. Actually had something on Bucknuts about him yesterday evening. He's a kid that's going to make his fourth visit to Ohio State, likely for one of the Ohio State games this coming season. So I'd certainly put him up there. I'll go with him at number 2 on the list. And those are two really special kids that I think Ohio State, as I mentioned, has a very legitimate chance to land both of them. Number 3, thinking a little bit more about that of, some guys I really like and that it could be Buckeyes, certainly. I'm going to go with Richard LeCount. Really, really like him. I've seen him in person. I've seen him on tape, and he's another special type athlete. And another kid, Dan, that they have a very legitimate shot at landing. He's a kid that's been to Ohio State multiple times. Of course, former teammate of Raekwon McMillan, and he has a chance to be a special type safety defensive back athlete guy, and Ohio State certainly, I think, is one of the two front runners, along with Georgia, to land Richard LeCounte.
Bill, we appreciate you joining us today. There's no better radio interview in the business, people. That is some straight knowledge, and it definitely helps, Bill, when every time you talk about a great prospect, you back it up with Buckeye fans have a very good chance of bringing him on board.
And Ohio State fans, I guess, like you and I have talked about, Dan, this is a special time in Ohio State recruiting, and it's not only recruiting, but in some cases, it's just selecting players. They decide who they want, and that's a great, great spot to be in. Special time for Ohio State fans.
We thank the dean. Obviously, there's no better place to check him out than the website. He's there all the time. He's all over it. Go over and check it out. Thanks, Bill.
Hey, take care, Dan. Have a great day.